And if the body turned out to be a drunk who'd fallen into the fire in the middle of a Halloween party, he'd be even more annoyed. The forensics team stood listlessly on the promenade, chatting to Sergeants Bill Larkham and Ben Bennett. They were waiting to process the scene, but there wasn't a lot they could do until the tide had gone out again. They'd lifted the body, but that was all. Hellier almost felt guilty about being there, as there was a mountain of stuff he could have been doing. But sod it, they could manage without him in the office for an hour or two. He took another swig of coffee and gasped as it burnt its way down his esophagus. At least they'd had time to retrieve the body before the tide took it, what was left of it. He hated fires. "DCI Hellier!" Campbell Fox, the pathologist, yelled, and waved a beefy hand in his direction. Dan heaved himself up, every muscle complaining from the 40-mile bike ride he'd completed the day before. He'd allowed himself to get out of shape over the summer, and that had to stop. No way was he going to become some desk-bound Wally, old before his time and shuffling paper, DCI or not. He jogged across sand and flat rocks towards the promenade, where a makeshift crime scene separated the police from the general public behind crime scene tape and a tent. Fox beckoned him again, impatience in every gesture. Dan put a spurt on. He couldn't quite get used to being DCI Hellier. It felt like someone else. The interview process had nearly seen him off too, but there it was, and here he was, jumping over the boulders on Exmouth Beach. "Enjoying the view, are we?" asked Fox as Dan stepped up beside him. "You won't be in a minute." The body was lying in a bag on a stretcher, ready for transporting to the hospital path lab. "I thought you might like a wee peek before I take him away." He unzipped the bag and exposed a body, half consumed by fire, settled in a stance like a boxer about to fight, arms curled into fists. Dan took a shallow breath, covered the lower half of his face with his jacket sleeve, and put his cup down on the concrete. "Oh, that is horrible. Burns victims are the worst." "Aye, they are. Luckily this one was rescued before the fire completed its work, so there should be identifying marks that we can use. Unlike on our bog bodies case, eh?" He scratched his beard through his mask. "On first look, he's clearly male. There is a small amount of head and facial hair on the skull. The skull has a massive fracture at the rear, on the occipital bone, which may indicate that he was dead, or at least unconscious, before he went into the fire. I've alerted the coroner." "Right. It looks like we need the murder investigation team after all." "Okay, thanks. Let me know when the post-mortem will be." Dan went back to his perch on the rock. Dead before he was burnt on the fire? At least unconscious? Could kids having a Halloween party really have burnt a man to death? He glanced at the 2 evidence bags full of the rubbish that had littered the site. It had been collected up by the 2 PCs on duty, and Dan made a note to thank them for their quick thinking in beating the tide. It certainly looked like it had been a bit of a party, beer cans, takeaway boxes, the black ends of joints. If one of the partygoers had fallen into the fire, would the others have left him to burn? Not if it was an accident, they wouldn't. He slid off the rock and walked back to the promenade and the scientists standing by. Bill Larkham would be fine on his own as crime scene manager, and it would be another couple of hours before forensics could get in to examine the fire in more detail. "Bill," he said, "we'll set up back at the station. It seems pointless having the primary site here. Come back as soon as you've cleared the scene." Larkham nodded. "Looks like murder then, boss. Or manslaughter. Whichever, I don't think a bloke with a massive hole in the back of his head jumped into that fire, Bill." Chapter 2. Tana sat cross-legged in the middle of the bed, with her eyes closed and her hands at rest in her lap. Around the room, the others rested on the floor, propped against the wall. Jace